Africa is a paradox, rich in resources, culture, and history, yet plagued by poverty. With 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 12% of its oil, 8% of its natural gas, and 65% of its arable land, the continent should be thriving. Yet, over 429 million Africans live in extreme poverty. So, what went wrong? Some blame colonialism, others point to corruption, poor leadership, or geography. But the truth is far more complex. This is the untold story of why Africa is still poor. And it's not just Europe's fault. Colonialism is real. Exploitation, borders drawn without regard for ethnicity or geography, and stolen resources certainly left scars. But countries like Singapore and Malaysia were also colonies, and within decades of independence, they became global powerhouses. Singapore, once poverty-stricken with no natural resources, is now one of the richest countries on earth. The difference? Strong leadership and sound policy. Some African nations have also risen. Seychelles, Mauritius, Botswana, and Equatorial Guinea are among the continent's wealthiest by GDP per capita. Their success disproves the idea that colonialism alone keeps Africa poor. The colonial legacy matters, but it isn't destiny. Hunger is at the root of many of Africa's problems. Despite abundant land, Africa missed the green revolution that transformed Asia and Latin America. While nations like Indonesia and the Philippines doubled rice yield in the 1970s, African countries fell behind. From the 1960s to the 1990s, food production per capita declined. Even today, over 30 out of 54 African countries produce less food per person than they did in the 1960s. Why? Many African farms are small, rain-fed, and lack access to fertilizer, irrigation, or improved seeds. Land ownership is often unclear, especially in tribal regions, making investment risky. Without property rights or state-backed loans, there is little incentive to modernize. Compare that to Asian governments that invested in farmers with infrastructure, education, subsidies, and access to credit. Food security unlocked development. Without it, a nation cannot industrialize. Africa's geography is double-edged. Yes, it holds rare earth and fertile regions, but over 16 African countries are landlocked, increased trade costs, and cutting off global markets. The Sahara divides North Africa from sub-Saharan Africa, limiting trade, unity, and development. Rainfall is unpredictable. Climate shocks like droughts and floods devastate crops and displace people. And the lack of navigable rivers and good ports further limits connectivity. Geography isn't an excuse, but it is a challenge, and one that requires strategic planning, infrastructure investment, and adaptation to climate change. Africa doesn't suffer from a lack of money, it suffers from a lack of leadership. Since 1960, over 500 billion in aid has flowed into Africa. Yet, much of it disappears into offshore accounts, lost in corruption, mismanagement, and failed mega projects. Political elites often enrich themselves at the public's expense. The result? Inadequate schools, hospitals, roads, and services. Poor governance turns abundance into scarcity. Countries like Botswana and Rwanda show what's possible with accountable leadership. Others like Equatorial Guinea and Zimbabwe are cautionary tales. Nations rich in oil or minerals but poor in outcomes due to corruption. Artificial borders created by colonial powers lump together rival tribes and split ethnic groups across nations. The result? Constant internal friction. From the Tutsi-Hutu conflict in Rwanda and Burundi to tribal clashes in Nigeria and Sudan, identity politics have fueled coup d'etat, civil wars, and genocides. This instability prevents long-term investment and weakens institutions. Governments are forced to focus on short-term survival instead of long-term development. Without national unity, development falters. Africa is addicted to aid. While humanitarian assistance saves lives, it has created dependency. In some nations, more than 40% of government budgets come from foreign donors. This distorts accountability. Leaders cater to foreign donors, not their people. Meanwhile, low-interest loans from China and others have created a new debt crisis. Between 1970 and 2008, sub-Saharan Africa lost 700 billion in capital flights. Foreign investment can help, but only with good governance, clear rules, and local benefits. Otherwise, it just deepens inequality. Africa's industrial base is weak. It contributes only about 10% to its GDP compared to over 25% in Asia. Why? Unstable governments, poor infrastructure, and low education levels drive investors away. Energy shortages, weak logistics, and bureaucratic red tape make manufacturing costly. Many African countries export raw materials, then import finished goods at a premium. This traps them in a cycle of dependency. Without value-added industries, there is no path to sustainable development. Africa has the world's youngest population. Over 60% of Africans are under 25. But youth without education or jobs become a burden, not a dividend. In many regions, school attendance is low, dropout rates are high, and educational quality is poor. Teacher shortages, outdated materials, and lack of infrastructure hold students back. Vocational training is rare, and graduates often face unemployment. Without skilled labor, economies can't diversify or innovate. Investing in education is not optional, it's essential. Africa's fate is not sealed. The continent has everything it needs to succeed: people, land, resources, and global interest. But it needs leadership. Transparent, accountable, and visionary governance can transform nations. Look at Côte d'Ivoire's recent economic reforms or Malawi's investment in agriculture. Countries that prioritize food security, education, infrastructure, and the rule of law are seeing real gains. The private sector, diaspora, and youth movements are also stepping up. From fintech in Kenya to manufacturing in Ethiopia, the signs of change are there. But without political will, even the best plans fall apart. Africa is not poor because it's cursed, or because it was colonized, or because it lacks resources. It is poor because of choices, bad policies, weak leadership, and systemic failure. The solutions are clear. Invest in food, education, industry, and governance. Harness its youth and protect its resources. Africa's story isn't over. It can still rise. This is Geopulse. Subscribe for more deep dives into global issues.